As the clock struck 2 a.m., Mark found himself cruising down a desolate highway, enveloped by a thick veil of darkness. The only source of illumination came from the dim glow of his headlights, which barely cut through the inky blackness of the night. The rhythmic hum of the engine was the only sound that pierced the silence, creating an eerie atmosphere that sent shivers down Mark's spine. The road stretched out endlessly before him, flanked by dense forest on both sides. The trees loomed like sinister sentinels, their branches twisting and contorting in strange, unnatural shapes. Mark felt a sense of unease creeping over him, a primal instinct warning him of impending danger. But he pushed the feeling aside, chalking it up to fatigue and his overactive imagination. Suddenly, a figure loomed out of the darkness, standing in the middle of the road. Mark slammed on the brake keys, his heart pounding in his chest. As his headlights illuminated the figure, he saw a young girl, her pale face twisted in terror. She was dressed in a tattered nightgown, her hair flowing wildly around her like a halo of darkness. Without thinking, Mark flung open the car door and rushed to the girl's side. She was trembling, her eyes wide with fear as she clutched at his sleeve. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely more than a whisper. "You have to help me. He's coming for me." Mark's blood ran cold at her words. Before he could respond, a bone-chilling howl echoed through the forest, sending a shiver down his spine. In the distance, he saw a pair of glowing eyes, like twin orbs of malevolent light, fixed on the girl. Without a second thought, he scooped her up in his arms and sprinted back to his car, his heart pounding in his chest. As he peeled away from the scene, the girl huddled in the passenger seat, her eyes darting fearfully out the window. Mark tried to calm her, but she was inconsolable, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "He's coming," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of the engine. Mark pressed down on the gas, pushing his car to its limits as he raced down the darkened highway. But no matter how fast he drove, he couldn't shake the feeling of being pursued. Shadows seemed to flit at the edge of his vision, and strange whispers filled the confines of the car. As they hurtled through the night, the girl's condition worsened. Her skin grew pale and clammy, her breath coming in shallow, ragged gasps. Mark's hands clenched the steering wheel, his knuckles turning white with tension. He knew they were running out of time. Suddenly, a figure materialized in the middle of the road ahead, causing Mark to swerve violently to avoid a collision. As he regained control of the car, he glanced in the rearview mirror and felt his blood turn to ice. The figure was no longer in the road. It was perched on the roof of his car, its twisted, inhuman face leering at him through the rear window. Mark let out a scream of terror as he realized the true nature of his pursuer. It was no mere mortal being that hunted them. It was a demonic entity, a vengeful spirit that had been awakened by the girl's presence. With growing horror, he realized that they were hurtling towards a fate worse than death. The car hurtled down the highway, the demonic entity clinging to the roof like a malevolent specter. Mark could feel its icy presence seeping into his very soul, filling him with a terror unlike anything he had ever known. And as the first light of dawn began to break over the horizon, he knew that their nightmare was far from over. As the sky lightened, the entity let out a deafening shriek, a sound that pierced the very fabric of reality. Mark felt a searing pain lance through his mind as the world around him twisted and contorted, bending to the will of the malevolent force that pursued them. And in that moment of agony, he knew that they were lost. The car careened off the highway, hurtling into the embrace of the forest that lined the road. Trees loomed like gnarled giants, their branches reaching out to ensnare the vehicle as it crashed through the underbrush. Mark felt the world spin around him, darkness closing in on all sides as the entity's unearthly cries echoed in his ears. And then, there was nothing but silence. Mark opened his eyes to find himself standing alone in the wreckage of his car, the morning sun shining down on the twisted metal and broken glass. The girl was nowhere to be seen, and the spectral entity had vanished without a trace. As he stumbled from the wreckage, Mark knew that he would never forget the horrors he had witnessed on that fateful late-night drive. The memory of the girl's terrified face and the entity's malevolent presence would haunt him for the rest of his days. A grim reminder of the darkness that lurked just beyond the edge of reality. And as he walked away from the scene, he knew that he would never truly escape the nightmare that had unfolded on that desolate stretch of highway.